the Awair policy. This is a state mandatory program. We're going to cover the training elements as required by the state of Minnesota. First of all, a quick overview of the objectives. We will define the Awair requirements. The various responsibilities and roles people have within those requirements, and some common terms in regards to safety. First of all, I wanted to spend a moment just to explain or give a scenario as to why it's important to take a look at some procedures. And this is an example of somebody with a construction company, but I think we could all relate and visualize what had happened here. The scenario is that 4 people drove up to the job site. The foreman was one of them, and as they get working into the job, that he realizes they're short some supplies, and so he tells the new guy to hop in the truck and go down and get some more supplies. So he gets behind the driver wheel and realizes that he's supposed to do a circle of safety and walk around the truck. And his first response is thinking, well, it really won't matter, we just pulled up 20 minutes ago, but I'm new, I better do it the right way. So he walks around the truck, and this is what he sees on the passenger side. So because he followed a procedure, he actually saved this kid's life. Now, it may not be a child, it may be equipment or something of that nature, but again, he didn't think it would make a difference, but following the procedure to do things that were outlined in a certain manner, he saved the kid's life. Had he driven off without doing the walk around, it would have been considered a fluke accident. He would not have been at fault because what's a child doing in a construction site? Any number of things like that, but the bottom line is accidents can be preventable when we follow the right procedures and take the time to do the appropriate measures that we are aware of. So I just want to preface that so that you understand why we have different procedures in place and why we're trying to proceed with the training on that. So the Awair program outlines some very specific requirements. Who's responsible for different aspects of safety? Everyone is responsible, no matter what your job, for safety, but supervisors and management have additional responsibilities above and beyond. So we're also going to identify our approaches to identifying hazards in the workplace. Common phrase of hazard assessments. It's really just looking out, what are the hazards in the workplace, what's changed since we were last working. Completing accident investigations and finding corrective actions to minimize future occurrence, and how to communicate the program to the employees and then enforce those elements to the employees as well. Again, it's not going to be effective if nothing is enforced or followed through. So that's what we are looking at in that aspect. So some policy highlights, some key goals and objectives overall is really to reduce injuries. We don't want our employees becoming injured. If they are injured, we want to make sure that it's just a minor thing and we can avoid lost time. So a couple ways that we look at that from a goal perspective is reducing the frequency of injuries, how often they happen, because statistics show that the more frequent you have injuries, the more likely you are to end up with a severe injury. And that just kind of makes sense. If you only have one injury, chances are it's going to be pretty minor. But if you've had 10 minor injuries, then your overall carelessness is going to eventually lead to a more severe injury. So we want to reduce those frequencies and then, of course, reduce the severity. And most often in the work comp arena, severity is measured by lost time, not being able to do your job. And that's one aspect that we have some control over, working with the doctor to identify what's safe for a person to do and then allowing them to get back to work in a modified capacity. So we look at providing that transitional or an alternative duty. It's a win-win situation for everybody involved. And then, of course, the Awair policy has to provide means to comply with the federal and state regulations that are out there as well. So roles management, as I mentioned, have additional responsibilities. It is every employee's responsibility to maintain safety. Management needs to allow for budgeting, items for personal protective equipment, other safety resources, allowing time for the training. That's a budgeting concern because the employees aren't productively making their widgets, but they are doing something that's going to benefit the company when they attend training. So all of those things management has to support and provide, and then assign the safety accountabilities, which is most often a supervisor or a foreman. And then, as I mentioned previously, the claims management practices, providing that transitional work. Again, it keeps the employee who's been injured maintaining their same paycheck. It provide some productivity to the company, and it's just a win-win situation because you are allowing that healing process to be part of, or the work to be part of the recovery process and working with the medical provider. And then management has to maintain OSHA 300 logs and post those, and that's just a record of the course of the year, what has occurred. Supervisors and or foremen have to, of course, support management's roles and their goals of the Minnesota Awair program, have to follow the training requirements, make sure the employees get the proper training, and then enforce and follow those safety rules. A supervisor is not going to be effective if they're not wearing safety glasses, but they're telling everybody else that they need to. So they have to set the example, and then they have to enforce it when it is a requirement. Supervisors should also conduct inspections of work areas just daily. It's just an informal walkthrough, just paying attention as you're walking through the area and identifying any hazards. Doesn't even need to be marked off on a sheet of paper, but they just need to make sure that they are aware of what's going on out in the work environment, taking a quick assessment. Has anything changed? Where are there additional hazards? Have materials been dropped off and stacked 10 feet high right next to the door? Are there tripping hazards? Are people bringing in fans to keep things cooler, and they've got extension cords running across? They have electrical hazards, etc. So just making sure that you're aware of what's going on in the work environment. Supervisors also have a responsibility to investigate injuries and incidences and make sure that when they do that, the goal is never to find blame, but to look at, is there anything that we can implement that would help prevent a recurrence? And so we're trying to look at those corrective actions. If employees are constantly tripping over a rug because the edges are curled, pretty simple corrective action is to replace it with a rug that doesn't have edges that are curled. And maybe that even means that you take the rug out until you get the replacement. Again, very simple explanation or example, but you get the point with that. So, and supervisors should also make sure that they are observing workers' habits and then coaching those who are taking risks. It might even be somebody that's just walking very fast through the facility, and that is a risk because they're not going to see somebody coming around the corner, or they're slip and fall because they're walking so fast. And we've actually had discussions with employers about that. And so supervisors just need to pay attention to what their employees are doing and address something that's a risky behavior. Employees have roles to attend training, which you're doing today, obviously, and you have to be responsible to follow the safety rules that are out there, comply with the PPE requirements. PPE stands for personal protective equipment. So if you are required to wear safety glasses or a high visibility vest or a hard hat, those types of things, hearing protection, any number of things, you have to make sure you comply with that. While supervisors have more of a responsibility to assess the work environment for any hazards, employees should definitely participate in that practice as well. And if you identify something, report those for corrective action. If it's something that you cannot take corrective action yourself, you might need additional authority or funds or something of that nature, but then just report it through the proper channels so that it can be addressed. And then you should also be encouraging your coworkers to follow safe work practices. A good safety culture watches out for each other. We don't have to go behind anybody's back and report something to their supervisor. We can just address it directly with the employee and say, hey, you forgot to put your safety glasses on. Put them on when you're in this area and doing this procedure. So just a good reminder, watching out for each other. So how to communicate that? Initially, employees, as they are hired, they get a training at PRO that gives them general safety information that will include this Awair program that you're getting here today. And then, of course, the client company needs to give the on-the-job training. It may be something with safe lifting, electrical safety, depending on your work procedures, what are the specific safety elements that need to be covered specifically for a new employee. Statistics show that some 80% of work comp injuries occur from people being on the job within the first 3 months. So it's very clear that new employees are at a higher risk of having an injury, and sometimes it's that training that will help alleviate that and just make sure that they understand, they know how to do the job that they've been hired to do. So we want to make sure that we give them that opportunity and we provide that proper training. We're always open to safety suggestions, of course. We'd like you to communicate that through your supervisor, or certainly give us a call at PRO, and we'll take a look at what we can do to address your concern and or implement a safety suggestion that's just going to make a better workplace for everybody. So that is always an option for any employee to do. The Awair program identifies regular safety training that should be addressed either initially upon hire. Some topics should be addressed at that point. Others can be addressed throughout the course of the year. Training topics from me at Pro throughout different client companies are usually based on some type of a risk assessment or the annual requirements for their industry. And so we'll look at those topics. Doing a risk assessment, if we identify that they've had frequent eye injuries, it's pretty clear we should do some additional training on eye protection so employees understand why they should wear that, and also with the supervisors so that they understand they need to enforce that. So those are how some of the topics get selected for the training. And then there are various compliance mandates, inspection results. If somebody has done an informal inspection through the facility and identified a hazard, it might create an opportunity for us to take a look at doing some training with that hazard to minimize its impact or potential risk for employees. So hazard identification, it sounds like a really big word. It's really just an informal way to go through, walk through your job site, like I mentioned previously, and just see, are there fans, is there coffee pots, are there extension cords stapled to the walls, are there big slippery spots, is there a lot of slush coming in from outdoors in the winter time and we have a big puddle right by the door, we need something to knock that off. Slips, trips, and falls are a common cause of injuries, so it may seem that I'm picking on that a lot for slips, trips, and falls from different aspects, but that's because it's one of our more frequent causes of injuries. So it's also one that's very preventable if we start taking a look at what's going on around in our workplace to make sure. But that's what we're talking about with hazard identification, is just that informal inspection. Employees should do that, foremen, supervisors should do that. Pro can come in and do more formal inspections, and we do that periodically with our clients. Sometimes it's with the safety committee or just myself as a safety consultant. We will also do inspections when we do incident investigations to just try to take a look at the scene where an accident happened and what we can look at for implementing safety measures there. Sometimes we take a look at the claim data analysis. Like I mentioned previously, if there's a lot of eye injuries, it's pretty clear that that's something that we should address. I had one company that had a lot of injuries to the hands. When we took a closer look, the majority of them were from utilizing the handheld grinder. So it's just a matter of having everybody understand how to approach and hold the grinder at certain angles when you're dealing with certain types of materials. And so it was just additional training that helped minimize that. So we'll look at those. And if you have a stellar record and you don't have those types of claims and things, we can always look at industry trends and statistics for what somebody in your industry is looking at for safety measures if we ever run out of topics, which doesn't usually happen. So again, there's different methods for the hazard identification, just the very informal processes, more formal inspections. We just want to make sure that we are identifying them because then we can help control them on the flip side. So for incident investigations, after somebody's had an incident, which may result in an injury where they go to the doctor, or just what we call a near miss, where something almost, it was a close call. And probably the easiest thing to example of that is like when you're almost into a fender bender because you didn't see that car pull out in front of you and you had to slam on your brakes, or you were tailgating or somebody was tailgating you and it was a close call. That's what we refer to as a near miss. If there was something that almost happened and you were really happy it didn't, we want to investigate those because nobody did get hurt in those situations, and if we can implement something, then maybe we can continue that trend that nobody will get hurt from a similar situation. So when we have those incident investigations reported, we want the supervisor to take a look at it. If we have safety committee members involved, they'll take a look at it. And then myself with Pro Resources, okay, what was at risk? How can we implement some safety measures to prevent that recurrence? Corrective action items should be identified and implemented as soon as possible, like I mentioned on the curled rug. And I had a client that had that happen. You know, the edges just get frayed and it kind of curls up, and she said, you know, by the third or fourth time she tripped on it, she was like, this is just ridiculous. It's a threadbare rug. I'm throwing it out. She had the authority to take that corrective action before somebody did fall and break their nose or their wrist or just get scraped up, whatever the degree of injury. It doesn't really matter. We just want to keep them safe. So if you have the authority to take that corrective action on something, do it as soon as possible. If it is something that you have to budget for or a replacement rug and have to make a request, put that through the proper channels. If you're not sure who that is, always give us a call at PRO and we will help facilitate that, no problem. So the incident investigation focus is not about blame. It's how to identify means to eliminate that risk so that nobody else has a similar incident where they may be injured. So the process when an employee reports their injury to the supervisor, we want to make sure that, of course, that employee gets their proper medical attention first and foremost. That is always our first priority, if you will. Once they've gotten their medical attention, and we don't want them driving to the clinic on their own, somebody should help in that process as well if they are going for medical attention. But then after that has happened, we want to kind of secure the scene, so to speak, to make sure that where that person was injured, we can just keep it intact like that. Give PRO a call. I may or may not be able to come in a relatively short period of time, but let me know of the incident. Talk to the employee if it's appropriate while they're waiting for go medical treatment or when they come back, whatever is appropriate. Of course, we don't want them held up for medical treatment as they're standing there bleeding because we need to ask them a few questions. Now, of course, again, get the medical attention first. But do talk to any witnesses. Did anybody see anything, hear anything? Well, no, I heard him holler after he had fallen. Well, okay, that's still a witness. What did you find out? What was going on? Where was he positioned? Did you notice anything on the floor? Anything caused a trip? Anything else? If you have the opportunity to take photos, that's always stellar, too. It just gives us more information. And, again, it's not about blame or any of that nature. It's just trying to identify what happened here so we can look at implementing some changes so it doesn't occur again. That's kind of called a root cause, just really looking at, like I've always said, 9 times out of 10 when I do accident investigations, I get one of two responses. I was in a hurry or I wasn't paying attention, which are two things that the employee has control over. So if we address those, we can eliminate a good 80–90% of our injuries right there. Just slowing down a little bit and being aware of your surroundings. I always encourage that at all times. But that's not a true accident investigation, just saying those are the two reasons they were in a hurry. A root cause investigation is going to get down a little deeper than that. Well, why were they in a hurry? Well, the customer order was in late, and so we didn't have enough time to get all the processes done, so we're behind the gun, we're missing our deadline, those types of things. Well, okay, if you're missing your deadline, why was the customer promised something if it wasn't the appropriate time frame to be able to get it done, et cetera, et cetera. And it may even get all the way back to, hey, our sales reps need to understand the timeline it takes to get a product out the door and not promise something sooner than it's reasonably able to do. So those are root cause steps, and just one example, I guess, of that might pertain in your industry. But we just want to always look beyond the first initial and ask a few more whys as to how did this happen, why did it happen, and try to get to that root cause. You don't need to be involved at that level. I just want you to be aware of those questions, and again, that those are the processes we're going through, because you may be involved in one by being a witness, et cetera. And so you understand, again, we're not about blame. We're just looking at some preventative measures. So the Awair program also has some specific safety training that has to be required. The new employee orientation, of course, is done, and then the client company does the specific on-the-job training, usually for a period of 90 days, depending on the type of job level it is. Sometimes it goes longer. Ideally, we'd like employees to get feedback at the 30, 60, 90-day intervals, and additional training may be provided. You know, if a new employee is catching on, or they only do something, you know, every other week or so, they may need some more time. And so just make sure that they are getting the coaching that they need. Other training that is required throughout the course of the year, again, the Awair overview, which we're doing here. Then there's also the right to know, which pertains to the hazardous chemicals in the workplace. And it's the right to know law, that you have a reasonable expectation to be aware of the chemicals and the hazards that they may pose to your health and fitness when you are exposed to those elements in the workplace. Emergency action plan, what do you need to do in case of tornado, fire, et cetera? What do you need to do in inclement weather, even traveling to or from work? Lockout, tagout inspections, those are all annual trainings that as you come on with PRO, we will do throughout the course of the year. Forklift operators available training that has to be updated every 3 years, and then other topics as identified by client needs. Hand and power tools, ergonomic training, back safety is just common training across the board because backs are the #1 body part that are injured regardless of industry. So there's just a whole plethora of different types of trainings available, but these are the regulatory ones that are identified in the Awair program. The Awair program also wants to be sure that an employer has previously determined some ways to enforce their programs and their procedures and their policies. Most commonly in the safety arena, we're talking about really complying with your PPE. If you have an employee that's refusing to wear their eye protection and then gets some eye injury that we usually think of as a pretty minimal expense claim, you get something in your eye, you get it taken out. But if it's chemicals in your eye and you lose your eyesight, that's not so minimal. You're talking a multi-million-dollar claim. So, we really need employees to follow the PPE that's outlined. And so with that, the Awair program has what they call progressive discipline. First violation, a verbal warning. Second offense, a written warning. Third offense of something similar in nature, again, a written warning with a suspension. And fourth is typically a termination. Now, I want to preface that there is always management discretion at this, usually related to the severity of the offense. So if you have somebody that's just blatantly disregarding safety rules and causes significant damage to your property or a significant injury, they don't have to just give you a verbal warning for that. If it is something that is so severe, you can exacerbate, speed up the progressive process, if you will, and go straight to termination if it is appropriate. Keep in mind, you can't be terminated because you've had a work comp injury, but if your safety behaviors are not such that's in compliance with their standards, you could be, they're just enforcing the employee performance on that if you're not following those guidelines. And always a no-call, no-show for work is just a standard termination. You are voluntarily resigning your position if you are not keeping your employer informed that you're not going to be in at work. So the Awair program also requires some safety rules to be posted somewhere within your facility, and the concept being that it's just kind of a general reminder. I don't anticipate that people read them necessarily every day or in depth, and they're not the golden rules that once you have them posted in your facility, nobody will ever get hurt. It's just a matter of, again, just raising that awareness, keeping people in the loop, reminding them about paying attention to safety. You guys are focused on getting a job done. You're production-oriented, which is fine, but we have to keep that safety element in the forefront as well. So safety rules, if you don't have a poster, you can make sure your employer is aware they can contact us at PRO and we can get them that. And it doesn't have to be any particular one. It's just that the Awair program requires something be posted related to safety in your workplace. Excuse me. So just a quick overview here. Everybody has responsibilities for safety. Every employee has a safety responsibility, regardless of their job title. Supervisors have all of those same responsibilities, and then some more specifically with their role with accident investigations and hazard assessments in the workplace as the two keys. And then, of course, management has responsibilities to make sure that they are providing the proper resources as well. So we want you, every employee and supervisors, to assess hazards, identify the risks on the job, and then take some appropriate precautions, communications. It may just be, hey, it's really slippery out today. When you're going in and out of the building or over on a job site, depending on whatever it is that you're doing, just watch for ice or any number of things. Make sure you're communicating those risks, you're complying with the PPE requirements and other procedures set forth by your employer. Understand the focus of accident investigations. I've said it once, I'll say it 3 times. It's not about blame, it's about identifying what can we do so that this does not happen again so no one else gets hurt in the same manner. And then just overall enforcing the program elements within the Minnesota Awair program, the goals, achieving that success culture for our employees. It's a win-win situation. Everybody gets to go home at the end of the day. So that is the Minnesota Awair program. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to call me at the Pro office. And I apologize, I should have had this on a slide. My direct number is 218-847-2646, and I am available anytime. Thank you very much.